You check your phone and read, "I'm fine," but are they really? You put on a blazer for a Zoom call. Why? You post a throwback, wait for the likes, and delete it 2 hours later because no one reacts. None of this is random. Every word, every gesture, every pause is a symbol. And together, we've built a world from all of them, one interaction at a time. Who you are, how others see you, and even what you think you might mean is all shaped by our conversations. Welcome to another episode of Communication Campus. I'm Dr. Melinda Stewart, and today we are diving into one of the most human-centered theories in our field, symbolic interactionism. Now, this theory explains that how you become you and how we create meaning is from nothing more than the sounds and signs, and how identity is shaped by something as simple and as profound as a conversation. Let's dig in. So first we need to understand that symbolic interactionism originated by the work of George Herbert Mead, a philosopher and social psychologist, and his students compiled all of his ideas into this theory. In fact, he never published a book in his entire lifetime. What we know is based on the work that his students put together and put forth. Now, his student, Herbert Blumer, identified SI, or symbolic interactionism, with three core assumptions. And he said that humans act toward things based on the meaning those things have for them. So again, we're putting the meaning into the words. The words themselves don't necessarily have this meaning. So we act towards things based on the meanings that we have put towards them. Meaning arises out of social interactions. So we gather that meaning, we interpret that meaning based on the experiences that we have. And that these meanings are modified through an interpretive process. So I can mean one thing, you can mean something else, but we might have the same idea for a specific thing. When you react to a text, a gesture, a look, you're not actually reacting to the raw fact. You're responding to the symbol in your interpretation of that symbol. What does that look mean to you? And this is really going to depend on some levels of experience and some shared meaning that has been created. So I've been saying a lot about meaning and symbols, and these are the two key pieces when we think about symbolic interactionism. Symbols are central. A wink, a wave, a wedding ring, they only mean something because we have given it meaning. My chapstick, for instance, has a meaning. But it only has that meaning because we've given it that, and culturally, we have assigned what this means. Now, I know that for some people, I'm a chapstick person, but there are Burt's Bees people, and there are Carmex people, right? And it seems silly, but there's kind of some things identified with the people that use different types of chapstick. They kind of become their own little cultural phenomenons. But we're not going to get into phenomenology for just a little bit. But what's important with this is that we understand that we don't just use language, we actually live in it. Language is the medium through which reality becomes social. Our sense of reality is because of all of the conversations that we've had. This is important because it not only tells us how we see the world, but it also colors how we see ourselves. Now, to this, we have the work of Cooley, and Cooley introduced this idea of the looking glass self. And this is an idea that our sense of self is formed by imagining how others see us. So it's our imagining of what other people see in us. So it's kind of like looking into a social mirror and wondering why I am the way that I think I am based on what other people are saying. It's a little muddy, I get it. You might need to take a little bit of time and really think about how this works when you look at the chapter for this episode. But in other words, we define ourselves through others' reactions, whether or not those reactions are real or just how we think people might respond. So if I imagine telling someone something and I imagine that they're going to have a really bad reaction, I'm going to think a certain thing about myself based on that proposed reaction. Didn't even happen. It was all in my head. But if I'm having a fear of how someone might perceive me, I'm gonna have some things to think about when it comes to me. So this idea of I and me is also a big piece of this. And so the social interaction model talks about this idea of I as the spontaneous creative self, and the me is the internalized attitudes of others or our socialized self. So our identity is actually shaped by this constant dance between the two of them. Where's my creative, my spontaneous, I like to think of it as my childhood side, right? I'm just going to go do the things. And the me side is a bit the more reserved. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? And for some, that me side is so much louder than the I side. And for others, the I side is the driver, and the me side, it might come along for the ride a little bit later on. But both of these shape how we see ourselves, and then, has an impact on what we do. So, symbolic interactionism helps to explain why we curate our online identities. Every profile pic, every caption is like a symbolic act. We are constructed by this imagined audience in our mind. And so when we decide what picture our imagined audience will think is more attractive, then that's what we put up. We see this happening a lot, especially these days with filters and the ability to put only the highlight reel of our lives. Very rarely do people put the pictures that make us look like this, right? And when somebody else posts a picture of us that we don't think is as flattering, we're quickly going to untag that picture or possibly delete it entirely. So researchers like Irving Goffman have extended this thinking with their dermatological model, seeing that everyday life as a performance. And you might think of your online self as your front stage. What are you showing the world, and what are you hiding in the back? What's behind the curtain? What's tucked away in the dressing room? And we have this act, this performance that we are putting on. Now, I want to say that I know not everybody does this. I do think that to a point, everyone at least thinks about what they're posting, because that's oftentimes what drives us to post in the first place. Now, I try to be as authentic as I possibly can, and the pictures that I don't think are fabulous, but others tag, I leave that tag. I am cautious of what pictures I put up because, yes, okay, I want this to be a good representation of who I am. This is something that lots of people will possibly see. So I'm mindful that what is out into the world of the internet is a good representation of me. But I also want it to be authentic. So sometimes I do talk about the struggles. I talk about the challenges that I'm facing. Not as a, oh, poor me, come feel bad for me. But I want people to see that I'm authentic and that I'm real. So it is a performance. And for me, it's a performance of authenticity as much as I possibly can. But I'm flawed. I'm human. I know I make mistakes. So yes, symbolic interactionism totally saw your social media habits coming, which I think is pretty cool. Because when these things were originally talked about, it was back in like 1950. So this has been around much longer than our social media habits. But they predict it pretty well. So SI isn't without its critiques. Some scholars argue that it lacks an empirical precision. Again, we have that question about what is it that I'm trying to know about what I know. So maybe it doesn't need to have empirical precision. Other scholars argue that it doesn't address large-scale power structures. So those that are interested in those critical theories, this isn't going to really work for them. But again, is that what I'm really interested in? Or maybe I do a mixed methods where I look at these symbols and how we're crafting these ideas, and then we bring in, well, how could power structures influence what it is that we're doing? And lastly, critics like to talk that it focuses heavily on individual meaning rather than structural inequity. And this, I do think, is a bit of a valid point of these different criticisms. Again, that may or may not be what you're interested in, but I do think that we have to take into consideration what the individual might be meaning and how that might differ. But its strengths are clear. It's adaptable, it's human-centered, and it's deeply relevant in a media-saturated world. So even though it is a very well-established theory, it still has some really great relevance to today. All right, so to wrap this episode up, we want to remember that symbolic interactionism sees communication as the foundation of meaning, identity, and our social life. It highlights how symbols, self-concept, and social roles are co-created in our interaction. So, we are going to continue with yet another interpersonal communication theory when we move on to our next episode on expectancy violations theory, where we're going to explore how unexpected behaviors shift our communication dynamics. Thank you for exploring meaning with me. Again, I'm Dr. Melinda Stewart, and I will see you next time. And in the meantime, keep communicating.